The reason why so many e-learning programs fail to stick is because of this. This is the forgetting curve, and it tells us that if you're exposed to something but you never look at it again, chances are you're going to have forgotten most of it in about a week. And as instructional designers, we're told that the antidote to this is, of course, spaced repetition. If you keep reminding your learners about your content at regular intervals that are longer and longer, every time they're going to forget less and less, and your training is going to end up sticking more. But let's be real. Most corporate e-learning isn't set up to have the learners come back at these perfectly timed intervals. Usually it's a one and done deal. The LMS marks it off as completed, the learners never look at it again, and down the forgetting curve they go. So what are we supposed to do about this? Well, there are game tactics that allow you to build repetition into a one-time training so that your training is stickier even if you only have access to the learner once. And in this video, I'm going to show you that tactic step by step so that you can leverage repetition without it ever feeling repetitive. But before I begin, hi, my name is Mary Jo. I'm a former video game producer, and now I help e-learning designers gamify their training. If you're an e-learning designer and everyone's happy with what you're doing, but you know your training isn't as impactful as you'd like it to be, book a free call with me. Let's talk about your challenges, and we'll see if my program is a good fit to help you reach your goals. All right, now let's get started. The example I'm going to use today is, let's pretend I'm teaching lab techs how to fix a centrifuge machine, which is those spinny things you see in labs. At the beginning of a project like that, you'd typically get a big pile of content, you'd organize it all, you'd teach it, and then at the end you'd have maybe 1 or 2 case studies where the learners apply the knowledge by simulating actually repairing a machine. This is all a one and done thing because everything happens only once in the training. That's not enough repetition to really build habits. So instead, our first step is going to be to look for a repeatable process in the content. So I look for which parts of this content actually repeat every time I repair a machine. And I end up with look for a quick fix. And if that doesn't fix it, then you can diagnose the problem, apply corrective action, and then test to make sure that you fixed it. These are the things you're going to do every time you fix a machine, and I'm going to build my entire course based on that repeating structure. Of course, some of my content might not fit into this structure, but that's okay. We're going to deal with that. Now, before I move on with the other steps in the procedure, I want to show you what this is actually going to end up looking like to the learner so that you can see where I'm going with this and it's easier to follow. So think of this process I just mentioned as one level in a game. All of this together comprises one level, and we have another and another and so on and so forth. And here I am in level 1, where maybe the problem here is that the centrifuge machine is rumbling. And we know that the first step in my process is to look for a quick fix, and the first quick fix I'm going to show them is make sure the tubes are properly balanced. So I'm not explaining what balanced means. I'm letting them play with this, and they're getting immediate feedback that's telling them, okay, this is balanced, this is not. And eventually by playing with it, they're going to figure out what we mean by balanced tubes, i.e. the weight of the tubes is evenly distributed. So once they get them balanced, let's say that doesn't fix the problem and the machine keeps rumbling. So the next step is to run diagnostics. Again, I wouldn't say click here. I'd say something like press run diagnostics and let them find that button. So they have to figure out what button that is, run diagnostics. Now, all these other buttons are pretty self-explanatory, so I figured they're going to be able to figure it out by elimination. And if you're really worried that this isn't enough guidance for them, you can always give them an optional hint button. And we go through all 4 steps like that, all the way to the end of the procedure where they've actually fixed the problem. In the next level, they go through the whole thing again with another problem. And let's say in this situation, they also have to check that the tubes are properly balanced. Because this is the second time they see this, they're not going to get as much help. So maybe I won't give them that immediate feedback, and now it's up to them to judge if the tubes are balanced, because in real life, they're going to have to know that. So they go through all the steps again until the problem is fixed, and so on level after level. They keep going through the same steps, but there's 2 things we're doing to keep things fresh. Number 1, we're diminishing the guidance at every step. So every time I introduce something new, that's when they get the most guidance about that thing. But the next time they see it, they get a bit less guidance, and the next time after that, even less guidance. The second thing we're doing that's keeping this repeating structure fresh is that at every level, we're introducing new things, new repairs, new problems that the machine can solve, new tools, new fixes they can try, etc. So yes, the steps repeat, but the beauty of this is that that's not what they're going to pay attention to. Their attention is always going to be on what's different in each level. And that repeating structure, i.e. the steps, that kind of becomes second nature. They internalize it without really having to focus and think about it. Okay, so now we can get back to the steps in the process to actually build something like this step by step. So step 1, like I said, is to look at the content and find find a repeating structure in it. And if you're stuck on this, really focus on what they're actually going to do in every situation, and B, what are the things that they repeat every time they fix a machine. That structure becomes the blueprint for each level. In my process, maybe you don't always have to check that the tubes are balanced, but you always have to do some sort of try of a quick fix before you do anything else. So quick fix is always going to be the first step, no matter what that quick fix is. So find that repeating structure, and step 2, build a playable prototype of your first level with sample content and make sure it all works properly. And now that you have one level that works, step 3 is to plan the rest. So here you take every single bit of content that you need to cover and you decide in which level you'll introduce it, and also in which part of each level, because my repeating levels have 4 steps. For example, we've already mentioned the Run Diagnostics button. So that's going to get introduced here in level 1, step 2. Why step 2? Because step 2 is about diagnostics. So it's introduced here, but they're going to see this button twice more for extra practice. I do this with all the content that I need to introduce, every problem, every repair, every tool, etc. And at the end, I get this, which is what I call my game roadmap. This is a plan of every single level, and I know exactly where I'm going to introduce every essential bit of content. And the things that require more practice will get seen more than once. Now, when you're doing this, if you start with the brick of content that the client gave you at the beginning, you are inevitably going to end up with content that doesn't fit into your structure. For example, my content calls for me to show them the lid handle, but my structure is based on how to repair a machine, and this part, the lid handle, never plays any role in any repairs, so it doesn't fit anywhere in my structure. And when you run into this issue of content that doesn't fit your structure, you've got 3 options. Option number 1 is, if the ultimate goal of your training really is to simply teach people how to repair a centrifuge, and that bit of content never enters into it, then you probably don't need it. So see if you can exclude it or at least make it optional. That's why it's a really good idea to pare your content down to the essentials before you even start this process. In my program, boiling everything down to essentials is what we call step 0, and we do it before we start anything. Click here to know more about that. Option 2 is, if you've placed all your repair related content and you end up with a lot of content that's left over, well, look at that content and see if you can't find a repeating structure that emerges out of that. For example, I find that none of these things have anything to do with repairing, but they all have to do with yearly inspections. If and only if inspections are an important goal of your training, then maybe you can find a repeating structure that teaches that. Maybe that process only has 3 steps. So now my course would have repair type levels and inspection type levels, each of them optimized for their learning objective. I can make them go through all the repair levels first and then all the inspection levels, or I can alternate, or I can even give the learner the choice of what they want to do next based on their mood. It doesn't matter, because in the end, they're going to have to do all the levels, but giving them that choice helps a little bit with motivation. Option 3 is when you have one bit of content that's important, but you can't really make a replayable system out of it because it's all by itself. In that case, you can make a standalone activity just to teach that one thing well. That's what we call an exotic activity, because it's unlike anything else in your course. I don't recommend building an entire course out of exotic activities because it's not a super good use of your time and budget. You're not reusing any of the stuff that you're going to build. And it can also increase the learner's cognitive load, because at every single activity, they have to learn new rules and a new interface. Step 4 is optional, but sometimes you need it. Let's say that my learning objective is that they have to know how to repair a machine, but my real world problem that I'm trying to solve is that they also have to be able to do it more quickly. So now I have 2 criteria for success: accuracy and speed. In that case, when you're making your game roadmap, for every single level, you not only have to decide what you're going to teach them, but also what the criterion for success is going to be in that level. Is it going to be accuracy or speed or both? Usually at the end, they have to be able to do everything quickly and well. We combine all the different criteria together. And once you've got your entire roadmap and your first level prototype works well, you can use that prototype as a template to build all your other levels that you've planned out. So to recap, if your e-learning program isn't helping reinforce skills enough, this tactic will help you build repetition right into a one-time training without feeling repetitive. Remember, find the system inside your content, design repeating levels based on that system, prototype your first level, and plan your levels to introduce and practice all your essential content. And remember, introduce and practice are not the same thing. Introduce has a lot more guidance, and practice is more about helping them recall what they've already learned. And build your levels with diminishing guidance until they're able to do everything well without any guidance at all. Do this right, and your training won't just check a box, but it'll actually build transferable skill without boring the crap out of everyone. But this, of course, is just one tactic that you can take from games. And if you want the entire process from beginning to end on how to develop e-learning, check out my program, the Effective Gamification Framework. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.